Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
It's a great pleasure for me to introduce someone. We have a lot of authors on our radio shows, but every once in a while we find an author who has really made a difference in his writing. And you're going to be able to hear Dr. Paul Coleman, who wrote a book called Finding Peace When Your Heart is in Pieces, a step-by-step guide to the other side of grief, loss, and pain. Welcome to our show, Dr. Coleman.
Well, thank you very much, Anita.
It's funny, when I do reviews on books, I kind of whip through them, and I couldn't do that with yours. I had to read it very, very closely, and I can imagine the good fortune that people have when they find you and they have personal conversations with you as a counselor. You probably are as you write your book, aren't you?
I like to think that way. People find me to be a easy person to be around with, and sometimes just chatting with me about mundane things, they feel better. I think that's because I do try to lead a life where I look at things from the highest perspective that I can. I try to look at things from the highest good whenever I can, but I'm human, so I'm not perfect.
No, but you do try, and I love the way you wrote Hero's Journey. People are really heroes, aren't they, in many instances?
Well, they really are, and they don't realize it because they think if they're going through a very difficult time and they start to feel weak, that there's something wrong with them. But the truth is, we have to find those moments when we're not able to deal effectively with what's happening so that we can reach down deeper into who we really are and come out the other end. We have to be weak before we can get strong, is another way of saying it. It's just that it's uncomfortable for people when they feel that way.
Uh-huh. That is so true. And we, unfortunately, there are many people that don't have the backup. They don't have people to hold their hand through a lot of the loss. And I've been a very big proponent of support groups and people who you don't know so you can bare your soul. And so many times they find such similar feelings. And that in itself is good. In fact, I've met some people who've become very close friends after that. Are you a proponent of support groups?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I want them to be run properly. There can be people in charge who are not necessarily as effective as others. But absolutely, when you're sitting across with someone and you realize you're not alone and they care about what you're going through, we need to have at least two things happen for us if we're going to change. It's not a guarantee of change. One is to feel understood, and the other is to feel cared about. And in a support group, chances are you do feel understood. And if it's done right, you also feel cared about. And that gives you hope that maybe things can be better down the road.
I want to ask you, though, a question which is personal, not that happened to me, but someone very close, and I've heard it now from other people. When someone loses a child to death, they never get over it. Well, why is that?
Well, I have four sisters. Two of them lost children. One was a young adult, and the other was age 2 when he died. When you say they don't get over it, it depends on what you mean by that. We're never going to have the same life that we thought we would have with them in our life, living with us. But we can transcend. Transcend something means it's still part of us. We integrate it, but we look at it from a higher level. It's sort of like being in an apartment building or something, and you go up one or two floors, and you look out the window, and you see the same things you saw on the ground floor, but you have a different perspective. So after a major loss, like a child, there can be a piece of your heart that's always kind of missing. But you can integrate that loss in such a way that you still find peace in your life and gratitude for what you do for what you do have. And that's always possible.
That's a very good response, because I have now been told this by 3 or 4 people that said change their life, they'll never be the same, they'll never, and they act that way. They just have given up on so many things. Now, I have never lost a child, and so I don't know, how I would respond either, but your words are, you have to have something. And I think what you're saying is you're going to have to bring in other things into your life, and just, I guess the thing I always say is, well, just be happy for what you had with that person, and now there'll be other things in your life. That's real simple, I know.
And, there's one quote that's one of my favorites, is we sometimes have to let go of the life we planned so as to accept the life that's waiting for us. And when a child dies or we go through a major loss or tragedy, we no longer have the life we dreamed of or we thought we were going to have. And we're in upheaval. And so we have to go through a period where we do feel it's unfair, and we might even be in despair. But it's possible to come through that and say, how can I make this a meaningful life, a worthwhile life, in spite of it? And sometimes even because of it. I've had clients and family members who, because of major losses, have put forth things in the community to help other people. One lady I know, her son died in a car accident, a teenager, and she went on to fund special training for teenagers above and beyond what they would get at any sort of local driver training school, but the real heavy-duty training that you might get if you were someone who had to travel difficult roads. And she pays for that. And as a result, she's getting a lot of satisfaction that she is doing something. And so her son's passing, while very, very tragic and sad, was not meaningless in that sense. She may be saving lives.
That's excellent. Great advice. And I can concur with that. I know of a lot of people here in South Florida that have started organizations and because of someone's death. So that's a very, very good point. I just hope people who are listening, you can appreciate what Dr. Paul Coleman is saying, and his book is Finding Peace When Your Heart is in Pieces, a step-by-step guide to the other side of grief, loss, and pain. I always recommend people buy books, and I say it's a good book, you should read it, but I have to tell you that this is a book you should have in your home. You don't have to have it by your bed, but you should have it somewhere, because you're going to want to pass it around. If it isn't for you, it's going to be for someone else. It is so well written, so smart, so kind, so it just taps into so many things. I want you to share something. When I was in Minneapolis at one point, I was volunteering at a hospital, and I was caring for someone who was in an iron lung for probably 25 years of her life. She was now in her 30s. And it's very emotional for me, and I couldn't believe that someone like this, why did it happen? How could anyone, it was terrible. And so the sister at the hospital had a talk with me, and she said, well, you can look at this with sympathy, empathy, or apathy. And she explained those to me, and of course I chose empathy and made a major difference with that in my life. So it's kind of what you were saying.
Yes, we do have those choices, and sometimes it's hard for us to believe that we have choices, but we can ultimately choose how are we going to respond to a difficult situation. And sometimes we have to go through a period where we don't feel like trying. In my book, I talk about 4 pathways that you will encounter after a major life upheaval. And one of them, I call it the path of inspiration. But it might also be called the wandering phase, where you literally are confused, you're not sure where you're going, and no matter what kind of help you receive, it just doesn't feel enough because you're really wanting back what you no longer have. And it can feel like you're alone, even when you have friends. At the end of the day, when you go to bed and it's just yourself with your thoughts, you do feel alone. So we want to know that in the wandering phase, while it can feel like there's a void, that's when we become open to guidance. When we're feeling more lost, when our heads are cluttered with what should I do? How am I going to get there? What am I going to do? We can't always hear guidance, or we may not even be open to guidance because we're so confused. But when we start to feel exhausted, or when we start to feel like, I don't think life is ever going to make me happy again, then subtle things may start to happen. Little ideas may come into your mind. People may show up. Synchronicities may happen, coincidences that seem a little bit unusual and inspiring that point you in a direction. But those things usually happen only after you've gone through this wandering phase of uncertainty and despair. So don't think that that's the final phase.
And how long would something like that take before you're open to those pathways?
That's hard to say. It depends on where you started from when these things happen. But for most people, there is going to be a period of time. It could be months, it could be weeks. It really depends on the nature of the loss and how profound an effect it has on your life. But it's supposed to get you to a place where your old ways of thinking and coping and the old beliefs that you once had, some of them no longer work. And that's when people get scared. I used to believe this. I used to believe that if I was a good person, bad things wouldn't happen, for example. And then they realize that that isn't true necessarily. And so then they have to rework it. So part of the process is identifying what beliefs do I have that are not working for me, that I now have to change and let go of. When I give a talk, one of the slides I sometimes use shows a man holding on with his right hand on a cliff. He's ready to fall off the cliff, but he's got one hand holding on. In his other hand, he has the briefcase. And you want to yell out to him, drop the briefcase. You can pull yourself up. And he doesn't want to let go of the briefcase, And this is what happens. We don't want to let go of certain beliefs. But we have to. Not because they're bad, but because they serve their purpose. But now we have to get to a higher perspective. We have to come to a new understanding of life and our role in this life. And in order to do that, we have to let go of certain beliefs or desires so that we can face what's up ahead.
Is a strange question to ask you. Do you ever tell people, any of your patients, that they should get a pet to help them?
They should get a what?
A pet, a dog, a cat.
Pet. Oh, I think pets can be wonderful, especially if they. I know this gentleman right now. He used to be a writer in Hollywood, actually, and he's an acquaintance of mine, somewhat of a friend. We get together periodically. Lives by himself, kind of a loner, and he's getting on in age, and he is more and more, I would say, lonely, and he would do wonderful with a dog because he loves dogs, but he just doesn't have one. And another friend and I are thinking of picking him up one day and taking him to a dog shelter and
yes,
see what happens.
Yes,
Any of these pets sort of call to you. Because it gives you a reason to get up in the morning.
Yes.
In the morning with your pet, you have to take it out for a walk.
Yes.
And it can be, especially dogs are so loving. No matter what you do, they love you. Don't we all want that unconditional love?
Absolutely. I just thought I knew you enough that you were going to say that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's a very good point, and I'm glad that you can see that, because I think when you do lose somebody, now of course I can't. If you lose a job, I don't know if a pet's going to make a difference. I was thinking more in terms of a person, but tell me how you do integrate the person losing an actual person as compared to a job, or in that it just, for me, it doesn't seem the same. But you certainly do talk about that.
Well, it's really about the nature of the upheaval. And when we lose a job, say, the question really is, what issue is this pushing in us? What's the bottom line? So it could be different for different people. Someone who's lost a job may say to themselves, "I'm no good. I I'm not competent. If I was competent, they would not have let me go, even if the economy was bad. Someone else may say, no, I'm good at it, but I no longer have control over my life, and I've lost control. Someone else might say, the people who love me, my spouse or my girlfriend or boyfriend, are now not interested in me because I can't afford to do anything. And so they may feel like they've lost a love relationship. So it depends. What is it that you're really losing when you lose your job, besides the practical aspects of an income? Are you losing a sense of control over your life? Are you losing a sense of self-esteem? Are you losing a sense of loss of lovability, of safety? Depending on how you answer that question may give us guidance as to where we have to go from here. So many people identify themselves with their job. That's who they are, you know. And then when they retire or they lose their job, they feel like they have become less. Their life is meaningless or less meaningful. I say, well, you have more to offer. You know, I tell people there's someone you haven't met yet, and you're going to make a profound difference in their life, and they're going to make a difference in yours. You just don't know who they are or when you're going to meet them, but they're there.
People must be very fortunate to have you as their psychologist. I have to say, you are very much like your book. Of course, you live very far away from me, unfortunately, because I'd love to just come and shake your hand and have lunch with you. You are really, how did you get to be like this? What kind of parents did you have? Or do you have?
My parents are passed on. I was very blessed. They 6 children in the family. I was number 5. My dad worked, and then he lost his job for about 9 months, 10 months, and there were still 4 of us home. I have 4 older sisters, so some much older. The oldest was 19 years older than me. So when I grew up, I didn't have all of us at home at the same time. I think I was 2 when my oldest sister got married, and I became an uncle at 3. A younger brother who became an uncle at 2 months. Their sister were pregnant at the same time. But it was a very loving, supportive family. We had very little money. I mean, we just got enough. We didn't have a car, actually. We walked everywhere. And we didn't live in a city. We lived in a town within walking distance. So you learn to appreciate things. I mean, I never felt I missed out on anything. I never felt, because when you don't have a lot of money, you make the most of what you have. Mm-hmm. And you don't get spoiled. So I think that helped. So
then in your counseling, this is the strange part, that you have such great values, but not everyone else has those values. They don't all have those values, rather. And it's hard for them then to put your perspective into what you can see so clearly, and then they may have trouble doing.
Well, it's true, and it depends on, if someone is learning long division, I'm not going to teach them algebra, So it's like, what's the next thing that they need to get to where they're going, and sometimes, people are not always as awake or as aware, They just look at things very, very differently in a maybe a more limited way, and they're not going to appreciate some of the things I have to say until they can appreciate some of the things that I have to kind of help them with that are smaller things that someone else might say was not that significant, but to them it might be. For example, when I just say I have a person who gets angry at other drivers, right? And they're angry a lot. When anything goes wrong, they're angry, right? So there's a roadway near my office. It's Route 9, and it's very busy. A lot of shops, a lot of malls, lots of traffic, and a lot of people are upset with Route 9 because you're always stuck in traffic. Okay? So people will come in, but they're angry about a lot of things, and they're angry about traffic. So I say to them, so what you're telling me is you should not be inconvenienced on Route 9. Do I have that right? Yes. And then they stop and they go, well, that doesn't make much sense, does it? So, well, not really. I mean, everybody's inconvenienced on Route 9. Why should you be different, right? So you're telling yourself something which is patently false. I should not be inconvenienced, which sets you up to be unhappy. So I say, can you simply accept? You don't have to like it. Can you accept that when you're on Route 9, you're going to be inconvenienced? And you don't have to fight it. Just accept it. And for some people, the idea of acceptance is a new concept, because they're so used to wrestling with life. If something goes wrong, somebody's to blame. Somebody must be yelled at. Somebody must be insulted. And the idea that, no, sometimes things just happen is a new idea for them. So it's like, okay. So we haven't gotten to the higher level spiritual qualities of, why do bad things happen to good people and what's the nature of the meaning of life. But they're at least able to tolerate the givens of life, or some of the daily on and off givens that we face, and not get so uptight about them.
I guess I was going to say that just don't take Route 9.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like,
no chance, no choice.
You kind of, if you want to get to certain places, you have to go to Route 9. Yeah. But isn't that life?
Yeah.
If you want to get some places, you're going to have to go through. I mean, look what it took for me to be a psychologist, and anybody who wants to be a psychologist or a physician or whatever, profession, you have to go through
right.
all these hoops and things. It's just what it costs to get there. Are you willing to pay the price? Can you not fight it? There's always something to learn.
Right. I've said that to people who say, I have to go to college. I learned all this. And I said, college isn't about just what you're learning. Book learning. It's about just what you were saying. How do you, when you have deadlines, when you have to do things you don't want to do, when you don't like the professor, you have to learn. It's part of life. Yes, that's what you were saying. So that's a very good point that you bring up. So it's acceptance of a lot of things, right? Just like spouses.
Yes.
I guess you probably deal with a lot of people who are either getting a divorce or have been divorced, and that must come up a lot.
Yes, that's true. And sometimes I have people say, can you sort out the difference between what you want and what you really need? I was in Orlando recently, down in Florida, in your area, at a conference in November. And the Orlando airport was where I was leaving from. And it was a huge amount of people trying to get into the security area. It was just forever to get into security. And then once you got past the first security agent, they put you in this line that was serpentine-like, and it took another 10 or 15 minutes to get to the x-ray machines. And there was a lady behind me, very upset, not angry, but just almost despairing. And she asked one of the TSA agents, "This is taking so long. Am I going to miss my flight?" And the TSA agent did not know. So I turned to her, and I said, "I heard what you said. Would you like to switch places with me?" And she said, "Thank you." Now, we both knew that I saved her, 15 seconds
right.
time. Hardly any time whatsoever. And her demeanor changed. She went from upset and agitated to calm. We were joking. We were laughing. Her whole demeanor changed. And I realized, what she wanted was to know that she was going to make her flight. But what she needed was to know that somebody cared.
I was just going to say that. Yes, that you cared.
Yeah, that was what she needed. She didn't know that she needed that. She thought she needed to know when is she going to make her flight or not. But what she needed was to be cared about. And I think that's true for a lot of us. So the more we can extend ourselves for others in a simple way, simple gestures, you'd be surprised that it just might make their day in some way. And they realize, wow. So there's things like that we can do. Even when we're not doing well ourselves, we can do little things like that might make a powerful difference. So we don't feel like our life is meaningless in that moment. It can set a ripple effect.
I just want everyone to write this name. Remember, this is Pencil Talk Radio. I always tell you that you're listening to the radio show. Write these things down. Write the name of this book down, please. Finding Peace When Your Heart is in Pieces by Dr. Paul Coleman, Coleman. And it is really, it's not like a novel. It is a step-by-step guide. So there'll be something in here that'll be perfect for you. Maybe you haven't had a great loss of a person, or maybe you will have. Hope it doesn't happen, but it will eventually. And if not, maybe there was some other loss, or just some of the examples that Dr. Coleman just gave us to accept and to see if there's other things that synchronicity that can come out of your circumstance. What is it? Maybe there's something you could do to help other people from your situation. And this book will give you it's a guide to it. And I have to tell you, it's not very large. It's a paperback. It's about 220 pages. It's a very special book. And it's funny. I almost gave this to someone, Dr. Coleman. I decided not to. I didn't want it to leave me. So I'm going to have to buy it for some other people because you should be very proud of this book. I think that a lot of, it's funny. You sit there now and you have no idea. You wrote a book. It's out there. How many people's lives could be changed just because they read your book? Isn't that a wonderful thing?
It truly, truly is. And that's one of the things that helps a writer want to write books like this, because you don't know. Every once in a while you hear back from somebody. Someone will write a note, or you'll see a review on Amazon, which you're always welcome. But you don't know. But then once in a while you do, and it's just heartwarming. And you say, and you don't know what that ripple effect is. That person could change their life because of it, and that changes other people's lives. So that's the beauty of something like this. But it's the beauty that anybody can do, and you don't have to write a book to do it. You just have to be a little more thoughtful and considerate. What
could you possibly write next? I mean, that's like, where are you going to go from now?
Well, the kind of thing I'm interested in is embracing things that we tend to shy away from, which is uncertainty, the magic of happenstance, not knowing, embracing not knowing, because we always want to figure things out. We want to know that the path ahead is predictable or safe, and we really have to embrace not knowing, because that's when the magic happens. So that's kind of what I'm playing with right now.
That's going to be a wonderful book, and I cannot thank you enough for this great interview, and also for your what an important book that you wrote. I'm just so happy, and I thank you so much again. It will go on YouTube so everybody else can hear it, and thank you for being such a great author, and also for being on our radio show.
You're very kind, Anita, and I'm delighted to have the time to speak with you.
Yes, well, maybe it will happen again. So thank you. It will. We're going to do another interview with you next month, the Heart Month.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.